Americans for limited government. And there's some really incredible news that came out yesterday. It was kind of lost in this kind of the shuffle with all the censorship hearings and all that going on. And of course, we spent our time yesterday talking about that. Today, I want to talk about what Senator Chuck Grassley released yesterday. Incredible information. Another piece of proof that it's not just smoke, but a wholesale fire going on in the Biden probe related to the corruption in Biden and Joe Biden. I'm going to show you, just go through some quick documents here so you can see what we're talking about. First off, we have an oversight committee tweet from yesterday, House Oversight Committee, and it's the FD 1023, which is a FBI form, alleging then Vice President Joe Biden was involved in a $5 million bribery scheme with a Burisma executive, has been released by Chuck Grassley. Now, remember, Burisma is the Ukrainian natural gas company that hired Hunter Biden for like $83,000 a month to be on their board of directors, so Hunter Biden could take care of their problems. So we've got a whole report from a confidential human source that the FBI, highly trusted confidential human source, that has been released. And most of this is about conversations that were held in late 2015, early 2016. So let's just take a look at what this actual document that we have not seen heretofore, what it says. It's devastating to Biden. First of all, the first page just kind of lays out who Burisma is and who some of the players are. The main person who is going to be the main actor here is a guy named Zlochevsky. Okay, Zlochevsky is the CEO of Burisma. So when I talk about Zlochevsky, just remember that he is the main actor in favor who's representing Burisma Natural Gas. And so he's identified in this, and it does identify that Hunter Biden was on the Burisma board of directors. And it says very simply, mentions the former president, Prime Minister of Poland, who was supposed to work Europe for Burisma, and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, who they hired Hunter Biden to protect us, quote unquote, protect us through his dad from all kinds of problems, end quote. So that's why they hired Hunter Biden. Next paragraph, one of the Burisma people said, very simple, the CFO of Burisma, said Hunter Biden was not very smart and they wanted to get additional counsel. So they're sitting there going, hey, we're paying this guy $83,000 a month, but he's not very smart. We may want to get ourselves some additional counsel in these areas. So we look at the second page. It's only 3 pages, this particular thing. And it talks about how what they wanted to do, what Burisma wanted to do, is to do an IPO in the United States. They wanted to get a foothold in the United States natural gas market. And so that was their objective. That was a business objective. And they had a problem because they were under investigation by the Ukrainian prosecutor general, a guy named Viktor Shokin. And so what happens? The confidential human source recalled in this meeting, in a meeting he was in, that took place around the time that Joe Biden made a public statement about Ukraine Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin being corrupt and that he should be fired and removed from office. The confidential human source told Zlochevsky that due to Shokin's investigation of Burisma, which was made public at the time, it would have a substantial negative impact on Burisma's prospective IPO in the United States. Zlochevsky replied something to the effect of, don't worry, Hunter will take care of all those issues through his dad. So Hunter's going to take care of it through his dad. Okay. So, so then they have a discussion about, whether or not they should buy U.S. company for 20 to 30 million dollars for IPO purposes, or they should just buy like a shell corporation. And Hunter Biden advised that they would raise more money on the IPO if they bought a real company, which was actually good advice. So I guess he did earn some of his money there. But the Zlochevsky was advised by the confidential human source that it'd be problematic to raise capital in the U.S. given Shokin's investigation into Burisma, as nobody in the U.S. would invest in a company that was subject to a criminal investigation. And so the confidential human source again said he advised and this guy is somebody who's FBI trusted. They've used him a lot. I now recognize they used to use Christopher Steele a lot, and we know how that turned out. So you have to take a little bit of a grain of salt with this, okay? But this is just the FBI report that was released. He suggested maybe, why don't we just pay some attorney 50 grand and sell the prosecutions here in the Ukraine and just get it out of the way. And Zlochevsky laughs at the $50,000 number and said, it cost $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to another Biden. That was what the CEO of Burisma said. It cost $5 million to pay one Biden and $5 million to pay another Biden. So then you get down and you continue to look through this, and the whole conversation is about Shokin's investigation and what to do about Shokin and the like, and wanting it to not turn into an international matter, and so you go down that pathway, and so it is the confidential human source, it says, understood this to mean that Zlochevsky had already paid the Bidens, presumably to deal with Shokin. So there's, you continue through this document, and you just continue to see, a variety of things. I'm going to go back to the document in a second. I just want to remind you of what Joe Biden said about what happened to Shokin.
I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time. I said, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
We're not going to give you the $1 billion.
Seem familiar?
They said, you have no.
Seem familiar? I mean, they had a Shokin problem. They wanted an IPO in the United States, and they had a Shokin problem. And before this occurred, we had Joe Biden. We had Joe Biden, the CEO of Burisma, Zlochevsky, saying that Joe Biden, was paid $5 million, $5 million for one Biden, $5 million for another Biden. That is pretty damning. And it shows that remember this video came out before the election, and we had all those people saying, oh, that's he was hyperbolic. Nothing happened. He was just doing his job to make sure corruption was ended. This kind of puts a different light on it, doesn't it? If he had $5 million in his pocket to deal with the Shokin problem, kind of puts a different light on it. Now, remember, he didn't deal with the Shokin problem when he was out of office, which is what he's bragging about it when he's out of office, when he doesn't expect that he's ever going to be elected anything again. He's collecting money on other fees and speaking things, as well as some international contracts primarily with the Chinese. But he's bragging about his own influence. Well, that's pretty much like Joe Biden. And he was treating the Ukrainian government his own personal corn pop. Tell me, fire who I tell you to fire. And he was flexing his muscles, and he was able to, and he got Shokin fired. That is exactly, we got him bragging about it. It happened he's admitting it happened during his administration when he was serving in office. And we have a confidential human source saying, guess what? We got I was in a meeting with the CEO, and he basically said, I paid this guy, I own this guy. Now, there are other interesting aspects to this, in that you had by the way, one other thing, if this kind of shakedown thing sounds at all familiar, I'll just remind you of the WhatsApp that Hunter Biden sent, and says, oh, wow. Says, I'm sitting here with my father. We would like to understand why the commitment it made has not been fulfilled. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand, and now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or a text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows, and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I'm sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sound like a shakedown to you? Sound like a shakedown artist to you? Sound like what Joe Biden bragged about doing in Ukraine? It sounds exactly like those things. Exactly like those things. And if you want any more insight on why Ukraine was so important, Robert Romano had an assignment. It was read Joe Biden's book, what he was saying about Ukraine. This was back in 2019, and he wrote an article on dailytorch.com that was talking where Biden brags about driving the president of Ukraine out of office in 2013. So, and this is a direct quote this is Biden's account. I made the list last of many urgent calls to Yanukovych, who was the prime minister of Ukraine at the time, in late February 2014, when his snipers were assassinating Ukrainian citizens by the dozens, and we had credible reports that he was contemplating an even more vicious crackdown. Now, recognize Yanukovych was threatening at the time to do a trade deal with Russia as opposed to a trade deal with the European Union. And so he was leaning, and his supporters were the Russian-leaning Ukrainian population. He was elected in an election. Biden, as vice president, was tasked by the Obama administration with dealing with Ukraine. Ukraine was one of his assignments. So he was the administration point man. He was the president for all intents and purposes when it came to Ukraine policy. So let's just continue on Biden's book, recognizing that Biden has a tendency to brag about his role a little bit more than perhaps it actually meant. But this is what he wrote. I've been warning him, Yanukovych, I'd been warning him for months to exercise restraint in dealing with the citizens. But on this night, 3 months into the demonstrations, I was telling him it was over. Time for him to call off his gunmen and walk away. His only real supporters were his political patrons and his operators in Kremlin. I reminded him, and he shouldn't expect his Russian friends to rescue him from this disaster. Yanukovych had lost the confidence of the Ukrainian people, I said. He was going to be judged harshly by history if he kept killing them. The disgraced president fled Ukraine next day. Well, it's, as Robert writes, this event sounds a lot like Biden's description getting rid of the Ukraine's prosecutor. And it's at that point, he threatened Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko who was the guy who replaced Yanukovych. So Biden makes a call. Yanukovych basically flees the country. That's the president leaves his job and says it's unsafe for me to be here and flees the country. So when Biden called up and talked to Poroshenko and said, you're not going to get your money, put in the context of Biden, everybody knew that Biden was, at least should have known, that Biden had a role in Yanukovych quitting the job and opening the door for Poroshenko. Trust me, Poroshenko knew why he got the job and who got him there. And it was Biden flexing U.S. muscle that did that. So when Biden calls up Poroshenko and says, you need to get rid of Shokin, the prosecutor, Poroshenko said, or you're not going to get your money. Not getting your money is essentially saying, or we're going to withdraw our support for your government. And the prosecutor was gone. That's these are things he wrote. This is what Joe Biden actually put in the record. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't made up stuff, or maybe made up stuff because it came out of Biden's brain, but it's at least what he's pushed out there as being reality as he sees it. So folks, we have this problem. Now, this stuff was in the public domain. We wrote about it in 2019. It's not new. It's not new that Biden bragged about getting the prosecutor fired in 2017. It's not new. The FBI had confidential human sources providing them with this documentation in 2020, laying it out for them. So it wasn't new. It's new to us now, at least putting all the pieces together. You have, this is a puzzle that now seems very clear. Joe Biden put himself into position to effectively be the oligarch of Ukraine and was shaking down people for money to get that done. And Hunter was a shakedown artist. We know that he played the same role with China in terms of shaking down China. By the way, at a time when the Trump administration was busily trying to turn the screws on China, Biden was busy trying to shake down China and to be able to provide them with influence. That's what he was doing. So, and the House Oversight Committee says that they have the goods on Romania as well. In terms of the $5 to $10 million, the House Oversight Committee has cracked the banking records and is busily putting together the money tracking. Something I didn't share with you. Zlochevsky, talked about how he had had a lot of different text messages and conversations, 17 total, 2 with the former vice president at the time, or with the vice president, Joe Biden, and 15 with Hunter Biden that he had to protect himself. And so he talked about that. He talked about it's kind of interesting. He felt he needed to have protection, but he did. And he talked very bluntly that he didn't like the Trump getting elected because it kind of blew up his deal. Wasn't happy about it because it blew up his deal. And suddenly he's saying, well, I need to protect myself. And so his tone kind of changed about covering his own tail, about his Biden connection. So, folks, any questions? Why, when Donald Trump called up President Zelensky after he came into power and said, there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening in Ukraine. Could you help a brother out? Now, we don't know how much Donald Trump knew about all this stuff that they obviously knew about Joe Biden actually bragging about shaking down the Ukraine leader over Shokin. He obviously knew about that. There were at the time there were rumors that the Russia collusion scandal was heavily based in Ukraine. So there's that, so there was that possibility. You have so there's a lot of things that were going on there, but Joe Biden did all this stuff, and the people knew, and the people who were around the State Department knew he did it. They were all, many of them were expressing concerns about what was going on. So they knew what he was up to. And yet, when Donald Trump made the mistake of asking about it, he got impeached. Once again, it's kind of like the third rail of politics is to try to mention Joe Biden's corruption. And, suddenly you end up, Donald Trump finds himself impeached. So what we have is a compelling case that the current president is little more than a two-bit thug who's shaking down, using his power as politician, and at least as vice president of the United States, don't know this is still happening as president, has used his power to shake down people around the world, to use his influence to benefit, people who probably don't like us very much. Now, is that unusual? Well, it's unusual. It's not unusual for people to become registered lobbyists for different foreign countries, or to provide advice to foreign countries about how to maneuver in the political environment that we're in. Those things aren't unusual. What is unusual is for somebody to have used their power as a sitting vice president to fire somebody who is a problem for somebody who's given them money. That's a problem. That's a quid pro quo. And in any rational world, every Democrat in the House and Senate would be calling for him to relieve office right now. The FBI documentation kind of nails it down. And you can say innocent until proven guilty, and he is innocent until proven guilty. But when you have the WhatsApp shakedown of Hunter Biden conducted against the Chinese energy company representatives who are Chinese Communist Party leaders, you have that, and it has the exact same tone and tenor. You can say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but you can also say, well, gee, was Hunter Biden, where was he when he did that? Is it possible he was with his father? Well, a few hours later, what happened? He was shown, he was photographed driving Dad's Corvette around Rehoboth Beach with a couple of women in his, in the convertible. So that. So he was in Rehoboth Beach. Biden was in Rehoboth Beach at the time. So they were in the same house. So it's certainly credible to believe that the shakedown occurred with Dad sitting right there. Folks, it seems trite to say the doors are closing because, there seems to be a lot of doggy doors available for this guy to crawl through. But any reasonable person looking at this proof set would have to move forward and impeach Joe Biden. And they'd have to impeach him, and they'd have to sit there, and then the Senate would have to decide whether to convict him. And I would want to see Democrat senators voting to actually acquit him with the overwhelming evidence that's being accumulated. Now, many of us are impatient for that impeachment to occur. Truthfully, I wish all this just go away. I hate the idea of having another impeachment. No matter what the cause, I really hate it. It's not good for the country to be impeaching everybody, having an impeachment on a president every time somebody new comes into office. It's unhealthy, but it's more unhealthy to have somebody who is corrupt to the bone, who's selling U.S. interests to abroad to be president of the United States. That's even more unhealthy. So I'm giving James Comer time. I'm giving Jim Jordan time to be able to make certain that their case, that all the lines are colored in. So when a case is presented against Joe Biden, it is irrefutable for anybody who's watching it on TV that Joe Biden is engaged in activity which is corrupt and deserving of impeachment. And so that's what we have to, that's what has to be done. Premature impeachment hearings and the like, where you're not prepared, where you don't have your witnesses lined up, where you don't know all the answers. You don't want to go into this with unanswered questions. That's why they're taking their time to diligently put together what actually happened. But I don't know how Joe Biden is not impeached based on what we know, based on the document that Chuck Grassley released yesterday. So that's the news from here. Let's see what we got in terms of chats. And I want to remind you, folks, we did have an impeach Biden campaign going on. It's not up on our website right now, but contacting your congressman about impeaching Biden. And I want to reiterate from yesterday. Those of you who are followers of Americans for Limited Government, and you have subscribed to our off of the getliberty.org page, getliberty.org. Those of you who have subscribed based on that there is that we have a stop the censorship campaign that is robust, and we actually have legislation that's been introduced to fight for now by Rand Paul and by Jim Jordan. So there's a lot going on there. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to, Kathy, he needs to resign. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. He needs to resign. That is exactly the right answer. He's not fit to serve, and it is and the country shouldn't be dragged through it's going to be dragged through. But the evidence just keeps mounting, and it's astonishing to me because apparently everybody in the world knew this guy was for sale, but the American people weren't told. The only people who seem to be surprised at this are the American people. Every oligarch apparently in the world knew, hey, let's I need to make a bribe payment to somebody in the United States. And they called up Hunter. Apparently it was international knowledge. Mary Bonanno, unbelievable. Yes, it is. It's the evidence just keeps rolling down. Oh, by the way, let's see. I don't want to do that yet. Let's see. What they should do is element by surprise. Don't say anything until you have all the facts and proof. Don't give them the time to come up with an excuse, a way of turning it around. Yeah, well, at the very least, they have to put this in the public domain to some extent because they're getting a lot of information, and you have a lot informants and others are really putting their livelihoods and lives on the line to participate. And as a result, you get information because somebody says, oh, I know this. And then other people say, well, I knew that, but I also know this. And so then other whistleblowers come forward and you get more and more information. They're finding out about, different investigations that the FBI had or different reports the FBI had, largely because of a snowball effect where somebody says, oh, I know about this. And then somebody else says, oh, I know about this. And it's kind of like it just creates a sense of snowball of information that's related to the Biden corruption. And so I think it's why they have to release it publicly. But the fact of the matter is, the politics of it's going to get really ugly. But the truth is that if they don't do the due diligence, they're going to look like this is a partisan hack job. And they cannot have this be dismissed as being as partisan hackery, because it isn't that. This is about somebody who sold access to the power of the vice presidency in the past. And if they have any evidence that he's done anything in the current environment related to China or elsewhere, we're in war in Ukraine for all intents and purposes. Is that related? I think it's a reasonable question to ask. I'm not willing to, I can't say that we are, but I just know we spent a heck of a lot of time worrying about Ukraine over the last 5 years. And prior to that, most Americans probably just remembered Ukraine as being nothing more than a really undefensible piece of land in the middle of Europe that in their game of Risk. Let's see. Now here's if you go into the chat, you can see the Impeach Biden Now website. So you can just click on there and contact your legislators, urging them to impeach Biden. If you've already done that before, you can do it again. I think the new evidence is important for them to be reminded that the American people expect Congress to stand up and hold this president accountable. And I think it's reasonable to do that. So if you would, so just go to the chat, click on that link, and you will be able to get that done. Let's see here. Dustin, so sick of these spineless individuals. Absolutely nothing will ever happen to him or his administration or anyone else. You have all the evidence you need, but yet nothing will happen. I'm going to tell you, Dustin, we talk about spineless individuals, but Chuck Grassley and Comer on the House side, but Chuck Grassley is just a stud. Here's a guy. He served with Biden for almost 40 years. He was a colleague of Biden's. They worked on some things together. They worked against each other on other things. They're both on the Judiciary Committee. They served on committees together. And the Senate's a pretty collegial place. At least it certainly used to be. And so you have to guess that Chuck Grassley and Joe Biden developed at least some level of friendship, beyond acquaintanceship over time. And Chuck Grassley is now basically about once every 3 weeks coming out and saying, Joe Biden's corrupt. Look at this. And leaking documents, releasing documents that he's obtaining from investigations that they've conducted on the Senate side. They don't control the committee process. He doesn't have the capacity to hold a hearing because he's the minority. He's in the minority in the Senate. So what he does is they get information through their investigations, and they release it. So the people who do have committees on the House side are able to then take the information that's released in the public domain and knit it together as part of an overall impeachment package. So I'm extremely impressed by Grassley and how the House and Senate are working together. Because folks, one of the dirty little secrets about DC is that doesn't happen very often, and the Senate tends to look down on the House and House members as a whole, and as a result, you end up with it's just a different vibe. And the fact that Chuck Grassley, who is one of the older, if not the oldest member of the Senate, is fighting this fight I find that to be very admirable. Chuck Grassley, for you, so he was Americans for Limited Government Legislative of the Year I think 3 years ago, and because of what he was doing to try to curb the deep state. And so Grassley's got a long record of fighting this, and I think that this is I don't know how Joe Biden avoids impeachment based on what we know is out there, but I expect multiple new shoes to drop between then. The person who is being rumored may be up first in terms of impeachment is Merrick Garland, because he directly lied to Congress on a number of statements that he made. So we've done videos on that in the past, but I was reading today that he actually may be front of the line, with Biden being number 2. Let's see. So keep Dustin. It's I know it's slow, but it's the way DC works, and quite honestly, I don't think any of you would want it to be anything more than a methodical process. This can't be just political gamesmanship or political payback. It has to be real. And the House the House Republicans in particular have a burden, a really important burden. It's a burden that should be there, of showing that this is so important, has so much national import, that it rises the level of throwing a president of the United States out of office. So to me, I'm kind of glad that they're taking their time to get it right. The immigration is at an all-time low. Do you even know how to read and verify? There's no proof that Biden did it. Where's the actual proof? Why is it not being shown? Allison, were you at the first part of this? Yeah, and in terms of illegal immigration being at an all-time low, we have 1.5 million gotaways since Joe Biden became president. That's 1.5 million people who came into the country who the Border Patrol didn't get. It's not all-time low. You can't. I mean, at some point, Greg Abbott is not putting up buoys all along the Rio Grande River because there's nobody coming across. So, I mean, I love people coming on and with alternative points of view, but at least be somewhere in the realm of reality. Let's see. I wish everyone would stop using the term impeach. It's meaningless without 60 votes to convict. Our military is woke, so the military cannot arrest this treason president. The DOJ is compromised, going back to Obama, so they will not bring charges. There's little available to remove him. His entire administration. It takes enactment of the Second Amendment. Okay, well, let me tell you, Jim. I'm going to tell you why it matters. There is Americans, actually real people, take the impeachment process seriously. And impeachment, investigations are one thing, acting on it is another. And as the evidence is compiled that demonstrates, at least would lead any reasonable person to believe that Joe Biden has been a corrupt actor for at least some of his political career, and took money in exchange for action. Those are serious charges, and the fact is, we cannot have a president who is bought and sold to foreign entities. It just doesn't work. So the impeachment process in the House, you're right. You can impeach him and you can lose the conviction in the Senate. But what ends up happening is people are watching it. They're making their own judgment. When they watch the Trump impeachment over the Zelensky phone call, they made a judgment. It didn't change their minds at all. Okay, they said the people who like Trump said, I like Trump. He didn't do anything. The people who didn't like Trump said, I don't like Trump. And so that's what it did. But with Biden, there's a large group of people who could vote for him and could vote against him in 2024. And an impeachment is not about politics per se, but it is about informing people about who this person is. And and as a result, whether or not he is convicted or not is not the test of whether you should do an impeachment. The test of whether the House should do an impeachment or not is what the activity that Joe Biden engaged in, violative of the high crimes and misdemeanors standards set in the Constitution for impeachment. 2, doesn't pose a national security risk to the country, which if he's under the thrall of Chinese money, it does. If he's the Ukrainian stuff, look at it. Well, where are we spending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine to fight a proxy war against the Russians? The Russians invaded Ukraine, no doubt. We're spending lots of money, given to the Ukrainian government. That's also indisputable. So does that play into this? Is that part of why we have this? Why we're in the situation we're in Ukraine? The fact of the matter is, and the Romanian one, I don't know what to make of that, but James Comer continues to talk about Biden being enriched by a Romanian businessman who, we'll learn more about that as the time goes on. But I think it's worthwhile for the House to do their job, and for the Senate to have a trial, and for John Tester from Montana to have to decide what's right and what's wrong. The two senators from Nevada, the two senators from Arizona, the Democrat senator from the senators from New Hampshire, the senators from the independent who's up in Maine, Angus King. I think it's really important that they have to stand there, and they have to, and there's a lot of other ones. They stand there and have to make a choice about, what am I going to do? Because their constituents are all going to be watching. And I don't have any expectation that Joe Biden will get convicted, that 67 votes will be there for conviction. But the fact of the matter is, they should be there for conviction. The House needs to make their case. They need to put it together in as concise a way as possible, because American public expects people to stand up, their congressmen to stand up for truth. And, the good news is, if they're impeaching Biden, they're not spending money. So maybe that's the ultimate plus side, but that's my defense of it. So at some point, I'm an idealist, and that it's not about, at some point you have to be able to have the truth on the record. And that's what this does. If nothing else, it puts the truth on the record. And let those who choose to ignore the truth deal with the political fallout that comes, whether it comes or not. Maybe there's no political fallout. But the truth has to be put on the record. That's what has to happen. And, and so I hate the fact that we're going through this, and we're going to have to go through this. I wish Joe Biden was just an incompetent, bumbling fool, and we didn't have to go through the fact that they add the word corrupt, but we do. And corrupt, bumbling fool is not a reason for impeachment. Corrupt, bumbling fool is. So that's why, Jim. It's very easy to stack up as to where did all the money go, but can the accounting be trusted? Well, that's a great question, John, and the answer is in the memo, in the actual memo I showed you earlier, the Zlochevsky, the CEO of Burisma, bragged that he had run it through so many companies that it would take 10 years to unravel the money flow. So he viewed that as part of his protections, as it had been run through a pretty extensive money laundering operation. So who's the money launderer? Well, the money launderer, in this case, Zlochevsky gave the money, put it into a money laundering operation that then funneled into Biden pockets. That's what Zlochevsky said. The House Oversight Committee has outlined a money laundering operation used by the Bidens It went through 13 banks, 20 separate companies, shell companies, and other things, other companies that took the money from a foreign investor, let's call that a foreign entity, and ended up with it landing in Biden pockets. So that's the and the House Oversight Committee has that. The other thing the House Oversight Committee has talked about, and I don't think they've successfully gotten compliance from the Treasury, but maybe they have. It hasn't been released yet, but because they're working with IRS whistleblowers, they have constructed this money laundering operation and how it worked, and they're now looking at bank records. They're going after the bank records and the Biden bank records on a whole from a number of different banks, because now they know the 13 banks they were dealing with. So it's an exhaustive search. It takes time. But there's another piece of this, and most people know this, but if there's a large transaction, there's a notification. There's at the Treasury Department that gets filed. And it's because it's just they're trying to avoid drug money laundering and the like. So when you're getting $5 million into your account, it's noticed, and so they're seeking to get those that information from the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department has indicated they will give it, hasn't told them they won't get it, but there haven't been releases or notifications by the House Oversight Committee to date that I am aware of that indicates that they've received requests they have on this. The good news is this memo lays a timeline and a trail of when the 5 million and 5 million happened. And so they're able to look at a very narrow time frame and say, what happened here with these accounts, and try to find and see if they can find the money landing in the Biden account. Because ultimately, a oligarch bragging that he did this is interesting. The money landing in the account's what's relevant. Any of you who have paid bills and if you're an independent contractor and you're waiting for people to pay, having an invoice is interesting. Having the account paid is relevant, because you can't pay your bills on an invoice. You can pay them. Well, you can borrow money against the invoice, but you can't pay your bills on an invoice, but you certainly can if the money's in the bank. So that is the critical piece. So I think the final nail is if they're able to directly tie, this payment came from this person, it arrived here, and this was in direct relationship to this, to this action, this person who demanded the action. And since we've got such a clear picture on the Shokin firing and why that was important for Burisma to be able to get an IPO, try to do an IPO in the United States to make millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, perhaps billions upon billions of dollars. That was, we have a case study, and we know the Biden shakedown operation goes because we've got the WhatsApp on the Chinese corporation, the Hunter Biden doing the shakedown, and then we've got Joe Biden bragging about doing the shakedown on Ukraine. So we see how the shakedown works. We see how they structure the payments. We see everything about this, and once again, you need to get the full picture colored in, but I think the outline of the corruption scheme is there. The drawing is all there, and now they're just coloring away at the inner parts, so it's a complete view, and it's and quite honestly, this is an impressive investigative job by the House Government Oversight Committee, and by Chuck Grassley. And I'm just going to go from there and just thank you all for joining us. Once again, it's astonishing to me that we're in this position. It's painful that we're in this position. I wished we weren't in this position. It's not good for the country to have a more than credible, a strong set of proof that the current president of the United States is for sale. That's a really, really bad, dangerous place to be. And some of his sale partners are happen to be where we're in some of the biggest flashpoints in the world. It's a dangerous place to be. I want to go back to being able to believe that the president's doing things in the U.S. best interest. I know that sounds naive, but that's what I want to do. I wish we could put all this stuff and we could shove the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube and go back to that sense. But unfortunately, all the evidence points to a president who takes money from the Chinese and allows a balloon fly over all of our major technological installations, not just taking pictures, but listening to ground conversations that they can't get from the satellite. All the evidence indicates that the decisions he makes are bad ones. And people ask, how can you constantly make bad decision after bad decision? Well, if the bad decisions are in the interest of somebody who he's getting paid by, that's a problem. And so we all need to be concerned about where we're at in this country. We need to pray for our country. So I'm going to end this because it's so depressing. I'm going to end this with a prayer. Lord, please lift up the United States. Please protect us from enemies within and abroad. Lord, we ask that you return this nation to being one that's blessed by you due to our following you, due to our hearts being hearts of God, just like followers of the one true God. Just like David, with all of his flaws, was of you, was a true follower of you, had a heart for you. So Lord, we just ask that you lift up this country, that you protect us, and that you give us wisdom on how to proceed, and that you could protect us from our enemies, and you allow us the wisdom to know how to help our friends. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So with that, I'm going to check out. Thank you very much.